Hi there, my name's Elizabeth Nallen, and I am here today to talk with you. I'm assuming it's a collection from a PSSC and potentially a DEC member to talk with you about our provincial report card for K through 8 and to help build understanding and really talk a little bit more about our assessment practices and how they relate to our evaluating and reporting practices. The presentation will be about 15 minutes, and I will allow 2 opportunities for us to pause and give you a chance to talk as a group and think about some of the information you're hearing about. And then I certainly encourage you to get in contact if you have any questions that I don't address throughout this presentation. So I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to follow with you. And I'm going to disappear into the corner. I hope a little bit even smaller. And so I'll just bring through the PowerPoint and again, have some discussion points and hopefully build some understanding and give you a chance to have some good conversation tonight as well. So I am the Director of Curriculum and Instruction and have been involved with my curriculum team in implementing the new report card since 2016. The provincial report card was implemented in 2016, and it was implemented in a way that followed a pilot period, and it was actually Anglophone West School District that had the provincial report card pilot. And throughout that pilot, they sought a lot of feedback from both parents and students and teachers, and there were some changes made during the pilot period. And what you're going to see tonight and what your parents' children potentially have been bringing home for a couple of years now would be the result of that pilot and the content of the provincial report card. So the purpose of our report cards, and not just for K to 8, but particularly in this presentation, I'll be talking a little bit more about K to 8, but the report card gives us a chance to reflect and support the changes in the classroom assessment practices that we've been moving towards over the last few years, where we really focus in on collecting a body of evidence that we call triangulated, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the presentation, and then allowing for progress throughout the year. And really our report cards are a snapshot in time, and they give us an information of how well a child is doing against the expectations and the standard at that point in time in the school year, knowing that the next report card has lots of room for growth and progress, and we'll be reporting again throughout the school year. So it really gives you a chance to think about information. It'll provide information on how your child is performing and progressing in all of the strand areas in each of the subjects that your child is learning throughout the school year. And also, the changes in the report card have improved and enhanced the use of the report card as a communication tool that provides a lot of information and not just a letter grade. In the past, before 2016, the middle level report cards contained a mark. For us in Anglophone East, it was a letter grade. Prior to that, it was actually an average, and it was an average of the overall mark in that subject area. So for instance, a child could come home with a 72 in math. Now a child would come home with information on each of the strand areas in mathematics, and there would be an achievement scale for each of the 4 strand areas. And they may be doing better in one area than another, and the teacher would have lots of evidence to decide that, and then they would base their evaluation on that. In the elementary school, in grades K through 5, we were also sending home an achievement scale, not a letter grade, not a percentage, but a bit of a scale. They were either needs improvement or they were satisfactory achievement, those sorts of types of representing that we were putting on the report card, and the teacher could write comments. In the middle school, teachers weren't able to write a comment. They could choose a comment, and it might have been something like, your child is doing well in this subject, but it wouldn't give the specifics that our new report card is given the opportunity to provide through our anecdotal comments that teachers now have to write and create. So what's important to know is that we have the same format now as well for K through 8 all across the province of New Brunswick, and that wasn't the case before. We didn't have a standard presentation across the province. Some districts were using letter grades, some were using percentages, and now we're all using the same achievement scale for grades K through 8. We all send home 3 achievement reports during the school year, usually around November, again early April or late March, depending on the year and how the weeks work out and when school starts. And then a June report card that would be more of the summative report at the end of the year to help prepare information for the following school year. And we still have 2 parent-teacher interviews that are scheduled throughout the year that sort of coincide with the first report card and the second report card. Usually there's an evening interview, and then there would be a half day provided for parents who are able to come during the day as well. Students stay home on those days, as you know, and it gives us a chance to meet with parents and share even more information. I will stress throughout this whole presentation that the report card is just one way of communicating with parents. It's an important way. It gives that snapshot at a certain point in time. But we certainly encourage parents to communicate with teachers and for teachers to communicate with parents on an ongoing basis so that you're aware of how your child's progressing throughout the school year, not just at those 3 points. So I get this question a lot when a child gets a report card, and I think again it's a bit of a leg over from our old reporting system. On our new report card, each reporting term stands alone. So in the past, if a child had experienced some difficulty at the beginning of the school year, but then they show growth and progress and they're mastering skills later on in the school year, that may have impacted their mark, because if we were averaging marks over the school year and counting things that they did very early in the school year and including those in our evaluation later on in the school year, even though they were doing great later in the school year, it may have impacted their marks. So our current practices and our best practice based on evidence and research is that we do not carry that information forward to influence the mark or the scale that we're choosing on the report card. Each reporting term stands alone. So when you read your child's report card in late November, that is only telling you, how is my child doing now? How have they done over this term and at this particular point in time? We're not judging against a year-end expectation. We're only expecting children to be at a certain point by November, and the information you receive will tell you how are they doing in relation to that expectation, not a June expectation. That wouldn't be fair because it's only November. So teachers will use a collection of evidence, all based on what your children are doing, and compare them against grade level expectations, not against other students. It's really important to know that. It's against the grade level expectations, which are very clear for teachers. They have curriculum documents and standards that they follow. This collection of evidence will include what we call observations, conversations, and products. And in the past, we may have used products more heavily than observations and conversations to help decide how a child is doing in a subject area. But we really try to balance our assessment practices now and include and count and value observations and conversations just as much as products. An example of a product could be an essay, might be a project a child has completed and passed in, might be a test, could be a quiz, an assignment. Those sorts of things would all be considered products. What teachers are now trained to do, and what our professional learning has focused on, is to help teachers observe learning and observe it visibly in the classroom, and keep checklists, keep records, keep sticky notes, and keep evidence collecting throughout the term to add to those products to help decide how the child's doing. They'll also have conversations with your children. They may, if a child hasn't done very well on an assessment, a paper pencil assessment, they may sit down with the child and say, can you explain to me how you would do this? Or if you had a chance to do this again, what would it sound like? And if the child can tell them and explain and demonstrate that they have understanding, we'll count that, because that's a great conversation and it's a great piece of evidence to add into our bank of trying to understand just how well the child understands the content and the skills, is able to demonstrate the skills that we expect children to have at that point in the school year. So even though there are 3 report cards, they just continue to build throughout the year. And by the end of the year, if the child is showing that they are able to demonstrate mastery and proficiency within the expectations, then that's the rating that they would receive on the report card for the achievement scale. I'm just going to show you the achievement scale now, and I'm going to bring up a pamphlet. I'm going to give you a chance to pause in a few minutes and just have a good discussion about the information you've heard so far. And to do that, I'll show you how on the video. So what we have now is what we call a 4-point scale, and it's actually 4, 3, 2, 1. And I said on the report card in the past, you used to get a mark for a subject. So this is how you're doing in English language arts. Now you get a rating for each of the strand areas in English language arts. So for instance, in English language arts, we have 3 strands. The first one would be reading and viewing. How well a child can read, their comprehension, are they able to understand what they read, and their fluency with reading. Then we have writing and representing, which would include their written work, how can they express their ideas, how do they represent, and representing in kindergarten looks very different than it would look in grade 6, and teachers are very, very well trained on the standards and the expectations around that. And then there's speaking and listening is the 3rd strand, and children being able to express their ideas with fluency when they're talking is a very important skill. And how do you communicate orally is something that we really strive for in our classrooms and promote and have lots of activities around. We have debates and conversations, and children have to defend their thinking, and that all requires skills within that speaking and listening strand. And the skill of listening is something we really support as well within the classroom, because it's very important to be a good listener and to truly listen to understand someone else's message is something we practice and set up activities for within the classroom to try to build that skill set within children. So the whole collection of evidence over the term would help a teacher decide whether or not a child is going to get a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1 on each of those strands that I just talked about. We also have a 3+ and a 4+, and I'll talk about those a little bit more in just a moment. So I'm going to bring up a pamphlet, which we can certainly provide, and your school should have copies of this pamphlet. I'll just show you what the front of it looks like. It's a parent's guide to the New Brunswick Provincial K-8 report card, and we provide these to the schools for parent-teacher interviews or for parents who want more information about the report card if it's new to them. I'll start with the 3, because the 3 is what we are certainly aiming for all students. We want everyone meeting the expectations, and I will caution you that a 3 has been perceived as maybe not a very good score on a report card, and that isn't a teacher's mindset, so we really have to make sure parents understand that. If you read the descriptor with me of what a 3 means, I'll just move my cursor down here. If a child gets a 3, it means the student has a solid understanding of the outcomes addressed to date and often applies learning to familiar situation. The students maintaining this level will be prepared for the next grade or course. So a 3 is solid understanding. So if a teacher is teaching a difficult concept, let's say it's a concept in math where they're asking students to plan and perform an experiment, and the children are able to demonstrate a solid understanding, they'll get a 3. And that, again, is a good solid mark. To get a 3+, it would really indicate that every time the teacher has done something in science throughout the entire term, that the child has always consistently demonstrated that proficiency of meeting the learning expectations. So let's say a child has had evidence that they weren't understanding it at one point, and eventually they are, but there may be some peaks and valleys in their understanding. Then the teacher would hesitate a little bit before giving a 3+, and they may have to talk to the child a little bit more just to make sure that it is consistent proficiency in meeting the learning expectation. And that child is also working very independently. They are independently able to apply their learning to familiar situations and demonstrate aspects of excelling in some learning expectations. So there is definitely a difference between a 3 and a 3+, both very solid marks, and that is, we certainly are striving for all children to be able to meet our expectations. We do have some students who, I'll move up a little bit, would be receiving 4s. And our descriptor for a 4 would be excelling. And this student would have a thorough understanding of the outcomes addressed to date and consistently applies learning to new situations. And the difference between that and a 3 was it was familiar situations. So this child may apply their understanding to something that the teacher hasn't even thought of yet. And they're doing that on their own. So their work surpasses the descriptors of meeting, but it's still within the grade or the course. We don't want people thinking because they're getting a 4, they're working at the next grade level. It's still within the grade level expectations, but they're just able to demonstrate understanding with that skill set that would be beyond what we would be seeing for a 3 and a 4. And we have standards that help us identify that in the curriculum documents. And then a 4+ would be a student that in addition to showing us that they have that thorough understanding and they can apply it to new situations, they're actually potentially surpassing the grade level expectations. So they may be able to apply this at a level that would include concepts that may be beyond their grade level. And that's when they make it a 4+ in one of the strand areas. Again, it's not an overall mark. And you could get a 4+ in one area. You're writing and you're representing maybe beyond the expectations for that grade level, but your reading and viewing may be on par, and you may get a 4 or a 3+ in that if you're getting a 4+ in another. So, and again, teachers are because they have their collection of evidence, they can show parents what they mean by that in terms of those 2 rating scales. There are also other choices teachers have. There would be a 2. And the 2 would be based on a body of evidence, again, that they've collected. That may be a combination of appropriate and below appropriate work. They have some understanding of the outcomes. They're getting there. They're approaching. And these would be the students that may get a 2 on the first report card in an area, but they'll be progressing to a 3 and a 3+. And that 2 won't hurt the fact that later on in the year, they're able to demonstrate a solid understanding and therefore have met the expectations and get a 3. So we do have students that may be approaching. They need some support, even to apply their learning to familiar situations. So those would be the students that would be, again, approaching. There may be some gaps in their learning, but they're getting there. And the teacher knows that and they're supporting them, and they just need to communicate that with the parent and with the child. Our hope would be that you're not seeing that for the first time on a report card, that if a child is approaching and working below the expectations and not meeting the expectations, that a parent would certainly be informed about that before the report card comes home. That would be our expectation. And then there could be a 1 where they would be working below an appropriate achievement level, where they're really showing limited understanding of the outcome to date, and they can rarely apply it to a familiar situation. And they would need significant improvement to be able to meet the expectations. And again, that would be communicated very well with the parent prior to a report card coming home. So I am going to go back. I'll leave those up there on the screen, and I'm just going to ask you to just up here, stop the video for a minute. And if you stop the video, you can take as much time as you want to have that conversation. And once you stop the video, you'll be able to start it again and continue the presentation. So I'll just pause there and give you a few minutes just to start that. So I'm back. I hope you were able to pause and start and stop the video okay. So I am going to move back to the PowerPoint presentation now and move into the other aspects of the report card. So on the report card for kindergarten through grade 8, again, there are sections where teachers would be writing a comment. Now, depending on the grade level, sometimes the homeroom teacher in the elementary school would be the one writing the overall comments. And then when you move into the middle school, because children tend to have different teachers for different subjects sometimes in middle school, it would be the subject teacher writing the comments. So there is a difference between the two, but the teachers do write their own comments. And the comments are meant to include strengths, needs, and or next steps. So the comments would be based on the achievement scale you're seeing on the report card and specific ideas on where the child can improve, and also what they're doing really well on, which is always nice to see on a report card. If they have any questions about the comments or about anything else you're seeing on the report card in relation to the achievement scale, your first method of communication would be to reach out to your child's teacher and have just a good conversation, attend the parent-teacher interview and talk with them about that. And that's for any grade level, all the way up through to grade 12. The other aspect, which we feel is very important and a great addition to our report card, is that we now have a section on learning habits. We feel that learning habits are extremely important to be successful in school, and they are evaluated on each report card. They are separate from achievement. So the achievement mark, the 1, 2, 3, 4 scale, is based on understanding and evidence of how well your child is doing against the standards and against the curriculum outcomes. The learning habits are the way the child is acting in class and the kinds of things we know are going to impact learning, but we're not going to include those in a child's grade. So again, I'm going to bring up the pamphlet and just show you the learning habits that are described in here, and it will give you a chance just to see, and we'll just choose one. They're meant to build skills and competencies moving towards 21st century learning and global competencies. So I'm just going to choose the, let's say the interactions. How are children interacting in class? So if you look at interacting, I'll blow it up a little bit here just to make sure you can see it. There are 3 bullets. So if a teacher is observing a child throughout a term and they're teaching them every day, and sometimes they're teaching them all day, every day, they get to know their students very, very well. And there will be conflict in class. I mean, that's a given. There's conflict no matter what you're dealing with. And conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. We want to support and help children develop the skills to resolve conflicts appropriately. And that is something we can now report on the report card. We also want to observe how well they work with others. Our employability skills would tell us that that is one of the #1 reasons that people are #1 hired, and the reason they may not keep their job is their relationship piece and how well they work with others. And the last piece of that is that their interactions are respectful, and that is a very important piece of contributing to a positive learning environment. So teachers know these 5 learning habits well, and they take time to teach them to the students, to talk about them with the students, and students should know well ahead of time that they're going to be evaluated on these. The way they're evaluated, it would be what we would call a frequency scale. So we look for how often are they displaying the characteristics underneath each of the learning habits. And we go again from the top score being consistently, which means almost all the time or all of the time, usually more than half the time, sometimes, which would be less than half of the time, and then there would be a rarely category, where again it would be almost never or never. We're not seeing them. If we look at the responsibility one, you can still see on their screen. Taking care of your belongings and school property is really important. Being organized, getting your work done on time, all of those sorts of things will go under responsibility. And again, the teacher can report on that. And this is a section of the report card that I've had feedback from parents say this is really helpful. If their achievement level isn't where we need it to be, are there things we can work on to help them develop the skills to strengthen their understanding and their learning? So those are really important concepts that we help students develop as we move through the term. So again, it's that frequency scale. So I'm going to give you another opportunity. It's the second main component. So again, if you're watching this video, you just need to stop it for a minute and give yourselves a few minutes to talk about the learning habits and the scale that goes along with the learning habits. So I'll put the learning habits back up here just so you can see them. And actually, maybe what I'll do is put the pamphlet back up, and then you'll be able to have a look at all 5 learning habits and the descriptors that go along with it in your discussion. So I'll just give you a pause for a couple of minutes to do that, and then I'll finish off with the remainder of the presentation. So again, welcome back. Hope you had a good discussion, and if you're generating questions, again, it would be great if you could talk to the classroom's homeroom teacher about it. If it's a bigger picture question and you want to call myself, Liz Allen, at the Office of the Superintendent, I'd be happy to speak with you as well. And the principal is certainly a key contact for you, and they're probably sitting there in the room. I should have mentioned them first. So reach out to your principal, and they're very familiar. This is our third year using the new report card in K-8, and they will be happy to help you with that as well. So the last piece of the report card would be the response form, and it's a separate piece of paper that comes in the envelope with the report card, and it gives a chance for both the student and the parent to respond to the report card and to send information back to the teacher, maybe set a goal for the next term, reflect on the learning habits, just make a general comment. I know as a mom, I always used to try to write something on the report card envelope to send it back. We could keep track of that envelope, but this is a response form that the teacher may use in class to try to help your child move forward during the next term. And these are just some prompts, some questions that you could ask your child when the report card comes home. If you're not sure what to write on the response form, this just might give you a chance to think about something you could put down, even something. I'll just look down at the question that says, what have you learned that you're really happy about learning? Teachers love to hear that. What's the best thing that you get to do at school? And where you're frustrated with any part of the learning. And if the child hasn't told the teacher that yet, this could be an opportunity. And again, there's always parent-teacher interview, and you can always call your teacher as well to talk about those types of things. There's just a few more questions here in terms of goal setting. Is there something you'd like to do better on? And because it's broken down by strand and students are familiar with strands, that's the way we talk in class when we're working in different strand areas, then they can maybe set a goal for next semester. And they could also do that in relation to the learning habits. Is there something they want to improve on, and how do they think they're doing, and is there one they want to improve on? And they may not agree with what the teacher said either, but again, the teacher's collecting evidence, so hopefully they can have a good conversation with that about their behavior with their teacher as well. So I'm just going to finish off with helping you understand that we also use this report card information on a regular basis. Schools use it. Schools use it, they analyze it, they look at how are we doing in a certain strand area in relation to potentially if there's 4 or 5 teachers at a grade level, they may look at how is our grade level doing and how are my students doing in relation to that grade level, just to get some benchmarks going and to talk to each other about strategies that are working. They also get a snapshot of how the district is doing in each of the strand areas, and they can do some good discussions and analysis around that as well. The District Education Council is also monitoring report card data, and they have set a goal that we would like to have 80% of students at the meeting or excelling levels, which would be again the 3 or the 4. And that's really what we're working towards. So we do a DEC monitoring report in literacy, numeracy, and science twice a year for the DEC. And I'm just showing you a snapshot of what we had last year. And this strand is in the science curriculum. And science, the science curriculum begins in grade 3. It's embedded into You and Your World in kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2. So we have a separate science strand in grade 3, whether or not you're in the English or immersion program, the curriculum is the same in terms of the strands. And one of the strands in science is plan and perform. And we would be looking at how do students tackle a problem. They're given a situation and how can they plan and to try to plan an experiment to determine what the result might be. And they have to predict in there, they have to make observations, they have to gather data, they have to do all those performance pieces in science. And the teacher is continually gathering data as they're working through these experiments. And this would be a good example of a child who may or may not be able to develop a strong plan to carry out an experiment, or they may need a lot of assistance and they just need guidance throughout the whole experiment. In the past, I can remember teaching science years ago where I would actually give the experiment to the students and say, follow these steps. And that isn't the way we're teaching science anymore. We want the children to figure out what the steps are. We want them to develop the experiment and the plan. They need to carry it out and collect data and tell us whether or not it worked. And it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. Start again. Gather the information. It might tell you something that you weren't expecting. That's what science is all about now. And if we look at the chart, I'll put my cursor on there. So in June 2017, we had 85% of our students in grade 3 that were meeting the expectations at either a 3 or a 4 on their report card in that Strand area. And then when we moved into last year, we started off the year, and this is something you would expect. In grade 3, they were having some trouble with that. We weren't meeting the 80% at the beginning of the year, but we were certainly exceeding that by the end of the year in June with what the teachers would be expecting at a grade 3 level. And I'm happy to say that at all of our grade levels leading up to high school, we were meeting that expectation in this Strand area for science. So that's good news. And our schools know we're monitoring this, so they're certainly striving to have very accurate information on there for us. So we're excited about that. And again, we're doing that in numeracy, literacy, and science by Strand area. And it's giving us some really good information about our performance levels in our schools. So that is the end of the presentation. I hope that fulfilled your needs in terms of understanding our reporting practices and our report card. And if you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to reach out to your child's teacher. And I really want to thank you for this opportunity. I think it's a great way to share some knowledge in an informal setting and give you a chance to talk. And please reach out to me if you have any other questions.